Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we bring you the stories of those who are making the world better, locally, globally, and digitally. We're part of Rotary International, 1.2 something or other million people around the world who are part of 36,000 clubs. Our club is both online and asynchronous. If you're curious about the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, you can find us at siliconvalleyrotary.com or rotary.cool. Now, one of the things that we do is find really cool stories for you. And the one that we've got today is one that is a great mixture of protecting the environment, of using technology well, of thinking innovatively, thinking sustainably. And we're excited to have Siddhant Gupta with us, who is the founder of the company Clearbot. He's got a good resume in terms of how startups work, and has this kind of approach to using AI for doing something about the waste that's in the oceans that I was quite excited to learn about and for him to join us to share his story for. So, with that, Siddhant Gupta, welcome to the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. We're happy to have you.
Awesome. Hey guys, good to be here and thank you so much for having me. Thanks for that lovely introduction.
And go ahead and launch, and we will take in your presentation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. So let me just put this up. I'm Sid. Let me take a moment to introduce myself. I'm an entrepreneur based out of Hong Kong. I run a company that builds AI-powered boats and ships that basically clean stuff out of water bodies, right? And over my sort of lifetime, I worked on a lot of interesting robotics and AI and ocean-related stuff, right? So I worked on robotic fish, underwater cameras for conservation, and today, of course, I run Clearbot, which is building the AI-powered chips for cleaning water. So, a bit about me: I grew up in Bangalore, in India. I've been in Hong Kong now for 9 years. That's where we started our company. And for me, my first experience with robotics was to build the world's fastest robotic fish. This is a project I set up at the University of Hong Kong, and well, basically took us 5 years, and we broke a Guinness World Record in 2020 building the world's fastest robotic fish. But that was my first experience working with water. I wasn't a water person per se. And I got me really excited. It made me realize how important the ocean is, to our world. And and so in 2019, and this is the origin story of how we came up with this idea. In 2019, me and my friends wanted to go to Bali for a vacation. And basically, we we found a fund at our university. We were still graduating then, so it was a graduation trip. And we found a fund at our university that subsidized student projects abroad, right? If you do something sort of useful to the community somewhere in the world, use your skills in class, then the university will pay for your flights. And so basically, we said, okay, hey, this is a great way to fund our grad trip, right? And so we went down to Bali almost looking for a problem to solve. And obviously, Bali has a lot of dirty water, right? With Indonesia, there's a lot of plastic coming in. And then what we found out is that, for the guys, so I do have some a video up, but basically there's two guys holding up a little machine. So these two guys are surf shop owners on the beach. So they actually rent out surfboards to tourists. And for them, if there's dirty water, basically they're not making an income that day, right? So for them, the beach and the water being clean is actually quite important for their day-to-day living and the business and survival. So anyway, we got together in our hotel swimming pool on this vacation. We started to put together the first ClearBot, which was basically four aluminum bars, some old water bottles for flotation, and a toy helicopter for propulsion, right? Pretty bare bones. And literally that's how we got started. So that's how the concept came up. We built it in Bali, and at the time there was no AI. It was pretty low tech. But what's interesting is we got back to Hong Kong, and we got back to our daily lives and jobs and whatnot. And we started to get a lot of inquiries from people saying, hey, I have this problem. My water is super dirty. I'm struggling to clean it. The best way is to use, paddle boards or use nets. And the Hong Kong government reached out to us and said, we're using petrol and diesel powered boats. They're actually creating more pollution than they're cleaning up on a carbon to carbon basis. So they're looking for other solutions. And so that's when we realized the potential of AI, because what happens is you have a problem which is very big. There's a lot of trash all over the place, and you require a lot of manpower and a lot of resources to actually go out and fish this out of the water. But with AI can do the thinking and driving of the vessels. And actually, basically, if you put it simply, if you had a crew of 10 people, traditionally you'd probably run just maybe four boats. But now with a crew of 10 people empowered with AI, you can actually run a fleet of 20 or 30 boats. And so you can do a lot more and you can do a lot more cleaning and becomes a lot more scalable. And so we started to kind of work on this idea. We iterated our prototypes and we finally got to kind of where we are today. So today we do this as a business where we make unmanned electric boats and ships. We're actually 75% cheaper than using petrol and diesel powered vessels. A lot of it's because we remove the fuel cost and therefore remove the emissions completely from the process. We also allow manpower scaling. So as I said, our manpower productivity is almost 3 to 4x of using a traditional boat, and so we can clean up a lot more water, and so that also reduces the cost, right? We're kind of spread all over. We're mostly in Asia, so we're in Hong Kong, we're in India, we're operating in Thailand. And in terms of what our machines can do, the bread and butter of our business is pollution recovery. So actually, we started off by saying that, oh, we're just cleaning garbage. But over time, we started to not only clean garbage, we started to clean foam, we started to clean oil, and have some, some a bit later to show you as well. And we're also cleaning invasive plants. So in a lot of places, water hyacinths, kind of invasive plants or algae, is also a huge problem. And so we've kind of evolved from saying just collecting garbage out of the water to actually doing all these different kind of things, right? What's interesting for us is actually when we look at our impact, it's not just collecting stuff out of the water. It's actually also a energy efficiency issue, right? So two challenges. Number one, a lot of the places where you have dirty water, you don't have good electricity, right? These are like remote places where like what, the waste is collecting because that's where the flow is taking it and so on. And so one of the problems we ran into quite early was how do we actually charge and operate these machines remotely, right? It's a huge challenge for us. It's a huge cost for us actually to go out to these places and keep running the boats to clean garbage. And so one of the big things we figured out was even for our business is actually creating a solar charging dock. And what that means is the machines can come in, they can kind of click in and charge without anyone having to be there on site, right? And so you can leave these docks out. You can basically anchor them on shore, on beaches, in like busy waterways, and the machine will go out at a fixed time, start doing its cleaning up work, and come back. And as long as you're running under 3 hours a day, pretty much the solar is more than sufficient. If you have to run more than that, you do need a wall backup because solar is not that reliable, especially on rainy days. Um, Awesome. We also increase manpower productivity, and this is really relevant because another big theme you'll see with environmental problems is we just don't have enough money to solve them, right? So we put a lot of money into a lot of things, and environmental problems is not one of them, right? So when we started looking at the cleaning the waste out of the ocean problem, you look at a problem that's actually very big, but you have limited money, and therefore you can hire a limited number of people to actually solve the problem, right? And one of the things the governments we saw as a challenge is when they were using manual boats, they were using a lot of people to run just one boat, and like each boat was only collecting maybe 100 kilos a day, right? And so, your output was really low. But with us, with using AI, the AI is able to do a couple of things. It's able to actually look at the water, it's able to identify objects, and it's able to drive around safely. So again, I do have a little screen video up, but basically what's going on is we set some waypoints and the robot is driving around on its own along those waypoints. And in a busy marina, it's actually going to be able to detect other boats, and the AI can make decisions saying, okay, this other boat's coming towards me at, at 10 miles an hour. So, okay, I've got to turn to port side or to the left side and go with a certain speed, right? So the AI is kind of doing the thinking that a human pilot would do effectively, right? Through software and technology. And the other interesting thing that the AI does is it actually gives us a lot of data. So when we started collecting waste of the water, we started working with recyclers also to give it back. And one of the things that became apparent is that when governments are looking to try and solve this problem on land, a big issue they have is actually bringing in good regulation. So very often we know what substances are ending up in the water, right? And we want to ban, let's say, thermocol, right? Like it's bad for the environment, or we want to limit its usage. But governments and NGOs and lobbyists need data to actually back their claims and back their decisions for bringing in these laws for managing waste on land. And so, actually, when we go out to see our AI is photographing each piece of waste that we collect, we get those reports. It goes back onto our dashboard. And the beauty is because of that, we're able to have a lot of data that we are then able to give governments and NGOs to bring a change at source, right? Not just in the water, but actually on land, where the waste management issue exists in the first place. So that's another sort of interest. So we actually know how many bottles and bags and so on we've collected every time we go out to sea. Cool. Very quickly, again, we collect garbage. We do water plants. So here's some quick videos of us cleaning water plants and garbage out of pretty polluted waterways. We clean algae out. We clean oil. So a lot of small scale oil spills, especially inland, that we're able to manage. We do water quality monitoring, which incidentally, enforcement of water quality is another big challenge again because of manpower constraints. While again with AI and robotics, you can kind of go out there and create artificially these resources to go and get that data and enforce water quality rules. We help water treatment plants manage sludge. And now we start to get into decarbonizing underwater mapping. So another interesting offshoot is we started off by cleaning the water, and then using this AI technology really to focus on cleaning and piloting safely for that job. And then what we started to find is because we're actually reducing emissions, there's a lot of companies that are actually looking to completely cut out emissions or reduce their emissions by 50, 60, 70% over the next 10 years. And a lot of those guys actually are now trying to work with us and say that, hey, okay, I don't have a cleaning job, right? But can you help me do some other kind of marine job where, again, you're using your AI and you're helping me cut my emissions to zero, right? And so we started to realize that the net impact of what we're doing is potentially a lot bigger than even just cleaning, right? And as decarbonization is becoming more of a trend and climate change is becoming awareness about climate change is becoming more normal, we see this becoming more the norm, right? Um, so yeah, I that actually is most of what I have to share. I'll be happy to go into a Q&A. Very quickly before I wrap up, I just want to show you some high definition drone footage of machine cleaning water. Very simply, for if you don't have a video when you're listening to this, how our machine works is it drives around. So you've got the garbage that enters the front of the boat. The front of our boat's almost shaped like a little funnel. And then the garbage enters in there. You've got a conveyor in the middle that actually picks the waste out of the water and then dumps it into a basket in the back. And we have boats of all sort of shapes and sizes, ranging from our smallest vessel can pick up just, sorry, our smallest vessel can pick up just 15 kilos. So that's like a really tiny guy, which you can pick up with your hand and chuck into the water. Our largest vessel picks up 1.5 tons. So that's like for like the really heavy duty, super dirty water. And that can go into like the open ocean and sort of more difficult environments as well. So we're always innovating. We're always trying to be bigger, better, and build what's next. So yeah, that's a little about Clearbot, and I'll be very happy to answer your questions if you have any. Thanks.
All right. Well, Sid, very, very cool stuff. And we certainly have questions. Before we jump into the questions, I'd like to introduce the others that we've got on the recording. In Walnut Creek, California, is Shag Shagrin, our club's paella master. And then nicely done, Shags. And then in Houston, Texas, Rory Olson and sidekick Gus, who may or may not be kind of like within camera range at any given moment, but the feline member of the team. My name's Rushton Hurley. I'm in San Jose, California. And Sid, let's start with this. There are a lot of different ways that people might take an interest. This was one of the pieces of your presentation that I thought was really interesting, that you've got people looking at your technology from a lot of different perspectives. If you were to like look at the biggest two or three buckets of clients that you have at this point, who are we talking about? Are we talking about regional governments? What do we got?
Sure. So I think the number one adopter definitely is government departments. And I would say the and so government departments, of course, is a huge umbrella by itself, but I would say that the other umbrella is ports, right? So shipping ports or container ports or bulk ports, right? And at the private sector level, you have like marinas, waterfront properties. You have a lot of hotels that are, by the waterfront that might be facing a waste issue. And so very simply put, in decreasing order of size, those are the clients, right? And within government, I mean, it varies depending on the country we're in. But yes, it's usually municipalities, right? So regional government, it could be state government, it even could be at the center level. And typically, very simply put, if there's a government department that handles a lot of waterways or water bodies, then we usually have business with them. So tourism, irrigation, canals, rivers, waterways, I mean, each country has a different way of structuring the government department. Basically, anyone handling water we deal with.
Nice. And have you found that there are certain parts of the world where either the problem is so significant or the interest in innovative approaches to working with the environment is so high that it's been especially easy to connect with people and talk to them about the work that Clearbot does.
Yeah, sure. So actually, I think Asia, in terms of pain point, definitely Asia is where a lot of the waste is at, right? So Indonesia, India has been really great in terms of business response as well, simply because the pain point's so high and the water in some places is genuinely very bad. And then I think we've seen a lot of, I would say, interest from European companies, actually from a purely interest standpoint, from innovation standpoint, right? And I think that's because they're actually the most heavily regulated in terms of environmental norms. So for a lot of those guys, the decarbonization norms are really important. I mean, they have pretty aggressive targets, and so for them, looking for innovation is important. In India, they really, and rather in Asia, what we see is adoption is really because the pain point is high, not so much because of the compliance regulations. Yeah.
Hmm. And so when you are connecting with potential clients for the work you do, is there a particularly challenging thing they bring to the table? Something that maybe presented the most significant engineering challenge for making the ClearBot a tool that could be successful?
Sorry, that was specific to innovation clients.
Uh, well, just in trying to get people interested in the ClearBot, is there a specific challenge that has been most common?
Well, I think funnily enough, it's not so much the engineering, it's actually everything else. So I'd say storytelling, legal, and then actually handling a business around it. Like those are the real challenges, right? So from a technical standpoint, this is obviously hard to do. I mean, goes without saying, but I think well, initially we had a funny issue, right? So we were based out of Hong Kong, and in Hong Kong, I mean, the water is dirty, but it's not horrible, right? And actually, it was very hard to convince people our solution works because you go out and collect like one or two bottles, and they're like, okay, this isn't very convincing. And eventually, we had our first project in India, and it was actually one of water body looked very similar. It was absolutely filthy, and then suddenly, like you could see the impact, like the before and after was like crazy different, right? And from a storytelling standpoint, actually, that really changed people's belief in our system, the understanding that, okay, this actually makes a real difference, right? And so I think storytelling was one piece. One of the other challenges we faced was legal, which is, at ports and stuff, it's a very regulated water body. You have very traditional 300-year-old laws as maritime ecosystem laws that you have to fit into, right? So we work with class societies, we worked a lot with insurers to actually get our solution insured. So all of that was honestly harder, I think, than the tech. And you need all those pieces of the puzzle there to really convince people that this works and actually get it out there.
So you've had quite a bit of startup experience before Clearbot. So is it that your experience trying out different things led you to a point where you could meet the kind of challenges that you encountered, that you talk about, the things like connecting with people who can handle legal issues or things like that?
The simple answer is no. This was completely different. So I had about a year and a half of startup experience before that, which was I did two companies, both of which eventually obviously didn't work out. That's why I'm doing this. I think Clearbot was for both me and my co-founder our first real sort of foray into this world. And I'd say we've just been very lucky. Incidentally, I think one of the privileges of our business is that we're doing good. And so a lot of people help us out just for the sake of helping us out, right? And so I think one of our unfair advantages as a startup has been the fact that because we have a good impact, there's a lot of important people who will reach out to, and they'll just be like, on a normal day, they wouldn't take a client like us because we're too small. But just because we're doing something good, they'll be like, yeah, you know what? Okay, I'll help you out, right? And I think that's been really great for us. So we have overcome a lot of the challenges in part because of the nature of our business.
And is that true for finding investment as well? I mean, you mentioned in your slides, there's a slide with a lot of Alibaba, Razer, Microsoft. I mean, all of these different folks. Is there something about that same doing good that creates the better story, that creates the better chance at getting investment?
Well, yes and no, both, right? So I think uh, between you and me, I think in terms of actually someone putting money in your bank account, no, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, right? The honest truth is, our business is a business. People look at it as a business, and we scale as a business. The reason we've raised money from who we have is because we run as a business the way we do. However, I do think that what's interesting is you do now, and this has really come up in the last 4 years, is you have impact-focused funds. Right. And so these funds are willing to say, because usually with these impact businesses, and this is our observation as well, it's not that they're not great business opportunities. In fact, they're very good business opportunities. As you said, they have an unfair advantage, but very often they're a little bit longer to build out. Because to create impact, you need more than just one or two stakeholders. You usually are dealing with three or four stakeholders. And so the scaling up process is just a little bit slower, right? And so investors need to be a bit more patient. It's just that. So let's say a traditional VC has an 8 year, timeline for a return. An impact investor would be looking for maybe 12 or 13 years. And that just that difference is more than enough to suddenly for us to become a very attractive investment, right? And um, so simply put, I think the traditional finance or investment market does not really consider, unfortunately, impact as that big a thing. But there's a huge community of impact investors today who are actually out there and helping companies like ours, scale up. And so that's becoming more and more the norm. Yeah.
You talked a little bit in the presentation about how you became interested in waterways and cleaning waterways and the relationship between clean water and the tourist industry and things like this in Bali. Where did you become interested in innovation and startup space?
I think one of my first slides was a photograph of me as a factory. I don't know if you said I grew up in Bangalore. The background is a photograph of a factory. So I grew up in a city called Bangalore in India, and my parents actually worked at a factory, and I spent a lot of time on the shop floor. Right? I used to visit them all the time, and I was always fascinated by machines, number one, right? And I think I was always fast. So the thing is, I distinctly remember that at the factory there was this job, and you have to put a part into a stamping press. You basically put a part in, press a button, pull it out. Put a part in, press a button, pull it out. It's a very kind of mundane job. Right. And I actually found out that eventually someone got injured on that machine. Right. And I realized I sort of took me back, and I was a kid back then, but it made me realize the impact of robotics, right? I realized that, look, if because it's such a mundane job, it's kind of almost mind-numbing, right? And I really believe human potential is better than that. So if we want to, I mean, I think we need to pull humans out of these dull, dirty, and dangerous places. Our economy has enough opportunities for creative jobs today where we don't need to be doing that stuff, right? And so I think that's where robotics has its place, which is to take humans out of dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with ClearBot as well. When we started this, we realized, I mean, if you go into this water, it smells, man. You do not want to be there, right? Sometimes it's like it's full of, if you put your hand in, you'll come out with allergies. Like it's that bad. So it's dangerous work. No one wants to do it. And so we actually look at, and that sort of ties into my own personal innovation journey, which is that I've grown up with this very strong sense of, hey, robotics pulls people out of dangerous places. If I can do that in some way in my lifetime, I think it's great.
What along the way has proven to be the biggest surprise for trying to bring a company like Clearbot to proper competitive status? Like, is there something along the way that you really just did not expect at all that proved to be especially challenging or especially helpful?
I think especially challenging with definitely the legal side of things, right, which is regulation. That was huge. I mean, for a small company like us to deal with like international regulation is nuts, right? So I think that was a very big challenge. But on the flip side, I think we've had a couple of big moments, partnerships. So things, people like Razer, the CEO, just organically reached out to us and said, "Hey, I want to help you guys. How can I help?" Right? And so it's been as you said, it's two-sided, right? So on one side, I think some of the challenges have been really, really big for us. Even for example, fundraising, we're a hardware business, we're not a software business. So we don't scale as quickly. And so even when we are scaling, it's much more hard. It's much harder than if we deal with supply chain and manufacturing and so on. So it's harder to do. But yeah, I think what has been surprising is the number of people who have come out to help us, support us, um, and just honestly, many of them with expecting nothing in return. So I think for us that's been really touching. It's so exciting to have me feel like you're part of a bigger community that wants to make a change, you know.
A story from the last decade or so that I have found particularly inspiring is the story of Boyan Slat and the ocean cleanup.
Correct.
And I'm wondering if the kind of work that the ocean cleanup has done has proven inspiring or helpful or turns out to be a competitor of some kind. I mean, like, is there something about a really um, really high profile effort like that that has proven helpful in some way to what you do?
Actually, yes, 100%. Like, look, this is such a big problem that one person cannot solve it or one company cannot solve it, right? I mean, it's a very crude way of looking at it. If you look at it as a market, ocean cleanup is barely scratching the surface, right? So actually, I think they're very good because the kind of awareness they bring to the issue from a governmental standpoint. So let's put it this way: if you're a government, and I can give you a good example, is actually the Indian government was considering, you know, solutions to cleaning up their waterways. When they see something like an ocean cleanup, which because of their high profile shows up, you know, on news feeds, on your social media, they're suddenly like, oh, there are solutions available. Oh, we can consider. And then they start looking out and they'll also find people like us. They'll also find, of course, our competitors. And the thing is, eventually, if you look at what I think, being in this space now for a bit, the actual solution to the problem is a combination of all these solutions. It's no single, it's not just us, it's not just ocean cleanup. There's like 30 companies that build the technology combined, which together is actually going to genuinely, if we all work together, genuinely create some sort of difference, right? So definitely having a bigger player bring that kind of awareness into the sector, draw out clients' interest is really good because eventually when you get to even when they get to solving the problem, they'll realize that, you know, there is a suite of solutions that you need. We are one of them, and so everybody wins, and eventually, actually, it helps make the environment better. So yeah.
That is a wonderful message right there. I want to give Rory a chance to ask the last question before we wind down the recording. So, Rory, go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, Sid, you mentioned something that got my attention. You have to understand, I'm a retired judge and lawyer. So you mentioned about regulation. And I was just wondering if you're engaged in a cleanup job which extends beyond a given country's territorial limits, what organization or organizations would have regulatory control over what goes on outside of the usual boundaries?
Great question. So I am gonna, before I start, caveat and say we don't actually do any jobs like that. And that's typically because if it's outside someone's jurisdiction, they're probably not paying for it, which means we're probably not able to sustainably run that project anyway, right? However, the answer is that technically on paper, if you operate out in open water, it's ruled by the ILOS, of International Law of the Sea, if I'm not wrong, which is set by the IMO. But effectively, that's no man's land, right? So in fact, one of the challenges with the problem is that it's actually within territorial waters, within rivers, estuaries, and shoreline waters where governments have jurisdiction, there is actually incentive and process available to clean this waste, right? Once it gets out into the sea, into the actual open water, it's nobody's problem anymore. Almost a tragedy of the commons, so to speak, right? And so actually that's why, and I think, and you know, you mentioned Boyan Slat and ocean cleanup. Actually, one of the big focuses is actually to focus on collecting it before it gets out into the open water. Once it gets out into the open water, it's 100 times harder, 100 times more expensive to manage, collect. And although there is no regulation, which in a way is a good thing, it also means that it's no one's responsibility, which is so it's a big problem. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Fantastic, Sid. We're going to wind things down and then I'll hand it back to you for a final word in just a minute. Thank you, everyone, for taking time to watch one of our videos or listen to one of our podcasts. We love that we can bring these kinds of stories to a wider audience and to get people in that space where they're excited about the good being done to make the world all the better. We ask that you share it with others, let others know about the kinds of stories that you find through the channels of the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and to also leave a message at the bottom of our Rotary page. you'll find the Discuss forum. Leave a comment there. That's one of the ways in an online and asynchronous club we're able to share ideas with each other. So, as we always like to do, we hand it back to our speaker for the final word. So, Sid, what would you like people to have clearly in mind as they finish up the recording or the podcast?
Well, I'll just say consume responsibly, right? So every time you're picking up a piece of single-use plastic, someone's gonna have to clean it up. So yeah, let's consume responsibility and let's make the world a better place. And yeah.
Fantastic, Sid. Well done, and everyone, we look forward to seeing you next week.